All right, before we start, I wanted to give you a little introduction to the Down Under wipes. And this is a part of a new God's Way project that was started since our last trip overseas. Many of you may fondly remember Jesus speaking a lot about overuse of unnecessary items, including
such as toilet paper.
So in God's Way, we started the No More Toilet Paper project.
So everyone in Australia pretty much who's associated with God's Way doesn't use toilet paper anymore.
Yeah, and some of you who've been out recently have been a part of this project, creating some of these. So these are...
Look at them, These are for your bottom.
Once you try them, you will never want to go back.
You feel it, pass them around, feel it.
Pass them.
Lovely.
Here you go. You can pass them along.
You will never go back to paper, trust me.
And so these are fabricated from all second-hand fabrics, bought from the local charity shop, you'd call it here.
Yeah. From old hotel, you know how hotels get rid of their linen frequently?
Towels and stuff. So some of that is hotel seconds.
Yeah.
And it's all cotton, it's a flannel and terry with cotton stitching. So at the end of its life, it can just go in the compost.
In the ground.
Yeah. And if you would like to order any from God's Way, you can.
Well, eventually what's going to be happening is there's going to be a breakaway. We don't want God's Way to be manufacturing things, really. So we're going to have a breakaway thing that if anybody wants to make them, they can use the same plan and
yes, so at the back of the hall you can find more information about them, and also a little step-by-step of how to make your own. So it's not meant to be sort of a profit-making or manufacturing thing in God's Way. However, if people don't have the time or resources to make their own, they can contact God's Way if they would like to receive some. And eventually there might be...
Have you all felt them? The quality, eh?
Yeah. There was a lot of prototyping that actually went into this. They're actually...
They would hand me one and I go, no, it's not good enough yet.
And it was square edges or round edges. What's going to be more durable, lasting in the washing machine? They had to go through the wash. There was a lot of, prototyping.
And there was a lot of also trying to slim down the manufacturing process, but still have it come out good quality. You know?
Yeah, the time and the resources.
But now it's like very nice.
Yes.
Yeah, we bought 100 of them from God's Way.
And also, you don't have to use it for your bottom if you don't want to. I'm travelling with some because you can also use it as a face washer or a crying,
a small
sopping
cry
up
towel.
tears, a mini cry, a plain cry towel. So I just wanted to let you know about them because it's a fun, exciting project, and Yvette in Portugal has already started manufacturing some with people there who want to have a go, and because she was a part of helping make them when she came out to Australia.
This is going to take off, guys.
Yeah.
You try it a few times, you'll be going, why have I ever used toilet paper? Yeah.
It might be too much information, but as soon as because I use this for wheeze as well as, you wash yourself after you do a poo and then you dry yourself with this.
Yeah,
so it's
you
not
don't
a
use it to
straight
wipe
wipe.
yourself straight.
Yeah. But as soon as I leave home and I have to use public toilets and go back to toilet paper, it's not comfortable in any region. So. Yeah. You become more sensitive is what I'm saying. There are many other benefits. Can I just also talk about the other benefits of having more sensitive nether regions, which is that there are other things you do down there and they get to be more sensitive too. Are you embarrassed? Usually you're embarrassing me.
No, I'm not embarrassed.
That's good. Now, what was the question? Sorry, Max.
What was the question again? Sorry. Yes. Well, the secret really is that if you clean yourself properly with water, then these are really just like towels, like convenient towels for the size of what you need it, And so basically, you're just using them like towels. So to be frank with you, like one of these lasts me a week.
As long as you wash well.
As long as you wash well.
If you don't wash well, then you have to.
Then obviously
you have to soak
just soak them, just like you would baby nappies or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes you can use an essential oil or
It's
a
all
mild
cotton, so
detergent, whatever you like. Well, obviously, if you're using them for wees, it's good to be well hydrated. I'm well hydrated, so they not get very smelly.
Yeah.
But also to perhaps soak them
Yeah.
in something
Yeah.
wet until you wash
before
them.
you wash them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not hand stitched,
No,
they
no.
are machine.
Machine stitch. Not
They're
a-
stitched inside out first, and then they're turned inside out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's why you get
Yeah.
that nice smooth edge. And
Yeah, and the finishing is actually done on a machine as well. Yeah.
Laureline, who gave us the final prototype after me sending back quite a number, I said to her, Laureline, this is perfect. This is like, she's done so good. She worked for a couple of weeks just doing a different prototype again, just a number of them to see how long they took her to do.
And we trialled overlockers
We
as well
trialled
as straight
different
machines.
different sorts of
Lots of
machinery.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Yeah.
The material is all sourced secondhand. So. Yeah. And it's they all, when they're washed and everything, they keep their shape well and everything as well. So,
That's part of the design too. So
So-
so if you want to see, sorry, Dol.
No.
If you want to see more about them, there's a lovely info sheet, even of how to use one. There's
Is there
diagrams.
a how to make one as well?
How to
Yeah,
make and how to
make.
use. Yeah, at the back. Yeah, if you want to have a look.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone who's got one in their hand, if you just return it to the back when the break is happening. Yeah.
They're nice though. Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah. You can
probably
choose your
find,
own.
yeah, what I find is I use both sides, but because both sides are very soft. So, you know,
It's
and,
more- it
and I use
depends
the
on-
rougher side for more wet and then the
Yeah.
the drier side for more dry, you know.
Getting
And
drier.
and I notice here in England, a lot of you have got like, what do they call them? Your heaters in your bathrooms and stuff. What are they? Those heaters, water heaters?
Like this,
Radiators,
the
yeah.
radiator,
You can just put one over the top of that and it dries off.
People are thinking about poo, aren't they? But honestly,
Yeah.
you do it every day. Every single person does.
Yeah.
And you wash yourself in the shower every day. It's just sort
It's
of like
just the
having a
same
mini
principle.
shower.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And save a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Trees that can be used for other things anyway, at least.
Yeah.
Something more permanent than something that's one-off, you know. At the back. Where's the
Yeah,
mics
if we
now?
do
Yeah.
mics now.
Yeah, let's do mics.
Yeah.
Hey, Jesus and Mary, I've been doing that myself, but I've been using a towel, and I just
Yeah.
want to point out that the towels fall apart. They fall apart after about 2-3 months use.
Well, your towels here are pretty bad, aren't they?
They are pretty
Yeah,
bad.
as well. See, what we found was that the second-hand linen we get from hotels is pretty good. They must have a good source of linen somewhere, and so what we find is these stay together. We have some at home that we've used for 12 years.
Right, 12
Yeah.
years. That's
Yeah.
Different design, but we used it for 12 years. It was not as good a design as this either, and we used it for 12 years. So a lot of them last a long time, yeah.
Good towels should last a
Good
long
towels
time.
will last a long time.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that's a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
Go to
I've got towels at home that I bought
years
when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
40 years they've been going. Yeah. It just depends on the quality. A lot of you are now getting used to buying things of bad quality. You know, you buy plastic things rather than stainless steel things. You know, the advantage of a stainless steel thing is not only can you use it your entire life, but the person you hand it to can use it for theirs as well afterwards. So you're making it once and it goes for, you know, hundreds of years. The problem with a plastic thing is you use it once or twice, or it breaks, or, you know, they all decay through, you know, obviously UV radiation and other things. And so while it's all convenient, it's not very loving to the environment, you know. You've got to learn to invest some money in doing something that's going to last rather than buying things that just don't last.
That's what I was thinking. I wanted to build some of them that's going to last.
Yeah, you want to do the same with a house, yeah? Same principle. You know, you don't want to build stuff. You know, now in Australia they're building houses, purposely building houses that only last 20 years. Yeah.
Crazy business.
and it's well known that it's a problem. There's all this industrial waste and building waste now going into landfill because they just, in some areas, and we noticed it even here, the development that we're looking right across, what they did is they got all the buildings that were already on it, bulldozed it all into a big heap, and they're slowly taking it away. Like, before they did their new buildings, they're doing a new building development there. It's a common thing where, the resources of the earth aren't honoured. And it gets back to what I said yesterday. It's all about the love. We're not loving to things. We're not taking into account that every single thing we use and every single thing we produce, if we brought more love to it, it would end up being a replicatable thing that wouldn't be so draining on the environment and eventually on our own livelihoods, actually, and our own welfare. Because as you now know, right, all of these plastics that we're using are going into the environment, where now many people, even babies now, are born with plastic in their bloodstream. That's scary to know what is going to happen as a result of these kind of things. And it's all because we just haven't been loving enough. It all boils down to that. Things that decay so slowly but also break into tiny little pieces that can go into your bloodstream, they're not good things for us to ever produce. We should know better, to be honest. If we were more loving, we would know better. But unfortunately, we tried to bring our normal water bottles, which are stainless steel, with us on this trip, but the weight of them, we couldn't get in amongst all the other gear we're getting onto our trip. And in the end, we would like to buy water bottles that we can use in every country, but that's quite pricey. But, also a lot of the water bottles are designed in such a way you can't put your hand in them to clean them. So it's sort of like they're designed where you've got to buy this plastic thing to clean them. And so, people are not thinking, oh, I've made this nice water bottle, stainless steel, double insulated, but now the only way I can clean it is by putting a plastic manufactured thing into it to clean it. At home, we've found we've found a scrubbing brush supplier, which is just made of wood and bristles? I can't remember the bristles, but it's a natural, and you can just throw it in landfill and it just decays. And our scrubbing brushes last just as long as a plastic one does. And yet, longer actually. I've used some now for 2 years straight, and normally a plastic one with my usage doesn't last 6 to 12 months, and we can just throw it in landfill straight after. We've also found kitchen sponges, which are made out of coir and natural sponges that you can grow, and we found 3 or 4 different types actually manufactured in Australia that you can. And these are real loving products, right? Because you can use them for the process you need them for, and then you can just put them in landfill and they decay. Worms get into them, and they're all.
We don't put them in landfill. Put them in compost.
We put them in compost. Yeah. Not compost.
Just in the land.
We let them decay. We just dig a hole and bury them. We'll come back 6 months later and then they're all gone. Yeah, these are the kind of things we need to do everywhere. Most of us don't think, what you buy is your kitchen sponge. If you're loving, you think about things like that. What am I buying as my kitchen sponge? What am I buying as my, all the products that I'm buying, wool, cotton, all repeatable and replaceable. When you start getting plastics and other things like that, all these the furry clothes that you buy now for cold, none of them are wool. Let me show you something, actually. Here's my wool jumper I brought on this trip. Lovely, isn't it? I reckon it's fantastic. And I've got 10 different types of this. They're all wool, the whole lot's wool. And they'll last me if I look after them and I don't let bugs get in. Because the problem with natural fibres, obviously, is bugs can eat them. And that's a lot of the reasons why people went away from natural fibres years ago is because bugs eat them. And so what they do then is bugs eating my clothes, so I'm going to get some non-natural fibres, so that way bugs don't eat them. But the trouble is, nothing really decomposes them either, when you get rid of them. And so you end up, now there's huge amounts of clothes going to third world countries, just getting thrown in landfill, all plastic related, not natural products. None of them decay. There's like huge rubbish dumps, sometimes they're mountains, and we see them in, you see them in different countries. I've even seen them in some Western countries, in the US, for example. They create these big landfill mountains and cover them with dirt. In Florida in particular, they do that, of just rubbish, people's rubbish. All because it just doesn't decompose. And the beauty of getting something that's decent quality is that you can use it the entire time. You still can express your personality with it, but this will decay in landfill. And so when I do get rid of it, if I ever do, these kind of jumpers, I've had some of them again that last me 40, 50 years. I've had one that only recently I didn't take as good care of, and the bugs got into it and ate it. But before then, I had it for 42 years. It was bought for me when I was 18, and I still had it when I was 58. Yeah. So, these are the kind of things we need to think about when we're even buying. If you think if every person on the earth became more loving in their buying choices, can you see what that does? That creates a demand on the manufacturer to change their processes. Do you follow? At the moment, there's no demand on the manufacturers to change their processes. If we got rid of the taxation offices in every country and replaced them with quality offices in every country. So those quality officers would say you can't release a product onto the market unless it's of good quality, unless it's replaceable, repeatable, the design is open market, and you can't release a product unless you do these fundamental rules of love with that product. You imagine the change that would happen then too. We wouldn't manufacture things that are rubbish. How much of what you buy ends up rubbish? It's a huge amount, isn't it? You think, even a lot of cars nowadays, they're major draws on the Earth's resources, but they're made so poorly that now, like they're talking about with all these electric cars, changing all the batteries every 7 years. Like you bought a car before, you could last 30 years. Now you have to replace, like a portion of the vehicle every 7. That is a huge draw on society and the land, the environment. And we're thinking of all of these things because we are not being loving. That's what it all gets back down to. We're not being loving enough in our choices and decisions. Yeah. So this is, when we talk about love, people sort of feel, it's not very practical, but it is very practical. It causes us to make practical changes in our lives if we're really loving. And by making these practical changes, we have the power to influence a lot of things that happen on earth because the average person doesn't think of being loving. And if the average person began to think of being loving, then you can see, the average person puts a lot of pressure on the market just by being loving, if we're all making that decision. Now, for me and for God's Way, it's a lot of research. It's taken, it took us months to find sponges that are actually, decomposable. It took us months. It was one little tiny company in Australia. They also made the scrubbing brushes too, and by finding them, you sort of go, wow, that's a company you want to support, So we bought 20 scrubbing brushes, and when we go home, we're going to buy 20 or 40 or 50 sponges probably from them, just to keep them going. But also that will last us the rest of our lives probably. Yeah. And these kind of products and companies are the ones you want to support, not the ones who give you a return, all those of you who love your Bitcoin or whatever, well, nothing's really getting supported with all that. So it's not in harmony with the laws of love, really. You know, and many people argue with me about it. Like, we have many people who want to argue about these kind of things. But the reality is, if you have a sense of what God's love would do, it's a no-brainer, as they say. You know, it's very clear what we should do with regard to everything we choose to do.
Yeah, which is probably a good segue into prayer, isn't it?
Because the only way, as I said yesterday, to become more loving than the average person is to receive love from someone that's more loving than the average person. You know, that, you know, logically should make sense. And so the key is, if you don't think it's real and other things, and this is why we need to have a conversation today. You know, last night, remember, one of the last thing I asked you to do was to look at the prayer and then see what you could see the prayer is identifying that might be an issue that you might have to address in order to become more loving, right? So that's really what we want to do today, this conversation we want to have with you today. And today what we're going to do is a bit different tomorrow than yesterday, because yesterday I drove the conversation. Today you're going to. That makes sense? But we're not going to let you do it in addiction. And we're not going to put up with you feeling sorry for yourself about your feelings.
Can you, do you want to give the God versus ant analogy? Because that might come up a few times.
Yeah,
do you remember?
You can do it.
Yeah. Well, it's yours. So
I know, but you can do it.
Jesus had
ours.
Yeah, it's ours. It's ours. When you consider God, who's the creator of the universe that we're in, and the creator of our incredible human souls, and you consider the immensity of God and God's capacity to love each of us individually, and God's created all these processes for repair and rejuvenation and even smaller creations happening on the earth. That's a pretty immense and incredible being, isn't it? It's sort of mind-blowing how big God must be. And then what we often do in our injured state, so in our sinful state, we are born into life and we have a few knocks. There's some hard things happen, or we get shut down in certain ways, and there's things we start to hold on to that are pain or fear, grief, sadness, worries. And then when you hear divine truth, often there's this feeling of like, oh, finally somebody's acknowledged all that crap. And then what we've found happens is that people often then want to come with this thing happened to me, and it's so big, Jesus and Mary.
No, it becomes very self-absorbed.
Can't you see, like, I've got this problem, you know? And actually, when you consider the vastness of God and the immensity and the capacity of your own soul, these things are really just like ant emotions. They're just things that are going to be with you for a short period of time until you're willing to feel about them, and then they'll be gone. But they don't compare to the immensity of your capacity or of God's love for you and what God can see as your potential. So often we have this joke at home where we say, yeah, but Maxine, that's just an ant emotion. You know, you're making it sound like it's the end of the world and it's going to define the rest of your life, and you couldn't possibly be more loving because you've got this problem. But actually, if we have some perspective, we go, okay, I've got that problem. I can deal with that, and then it'll be over. It's just it's a little ant or an anthill in my journey of life, you know. But often when we get self-involved and self-absorbed, we're like, no.
Everything gets blown out of perspective.
Yeah. This is going to be the defining feature of my life, a lot of you. It's like, this thing happened, so therefore this is me, or this is why I can't be this loving person, or I can't achieve that thing that I want to do. So if we call you on having an ant emotion, we're just calling you on being a little bit self-involved. It's not to deny the things that have happened in your life, obviously. They need to be felt. But we need to have some perspective that we can feel them and that they're transient. They're not defining us.
If you treat your emotions as if they're mountains, can you see your attitude towards it is, I'm not going to be able to solve it. But if you treat your emotions as if they're just something I've got to go through, and I'll get through it, and it'll be done when I get through it. And you treat your emotions like that, can you see your whole approach to it's going to be quite different? So a lot of it's about how you look at your emotions. And for most of us, our own emotions are like mountains and everybody else's emotions are like anthills already. You know, we have a lack of perspective about who really has trauma versus whether we have trauma or not. So there's usually a lack of perspective there. But also we have this lack of perspective in terms of how big it is for the rest of our life. You've got to remember that you have been created to be an eternal being. This life you have on earth is a very, very, very short part of it. You could call this the gestation period of your life, where you're learning some basics, learning some fundamentals, right? And so this part of your life is a minor part of your future. And I know that's not the perspective most of us have. Most of us have, this life is more important than anything else. And the perspective most people on earth have is that, that most people don't believe in an afterlife. That's the reality. Even the people who say they believe in one, when they get close to death, it's apparent they don't believe in one, because they get so afraid of death and so afraid of what's going to happen, to them in nothingness. They're afraid they're going to become nothing. And there's no need to fear these things, but a lot of it is lack of education, lack of acknowledgement of truth that occurs. But also it's because we're out of perspective. We've lost perspective. And you think about your own arguments that you have with people. Frequently, you've lost perspective. Quite often I say to Mary when we're driving along, but that's just a first world problem. It's not. We've lost perspective. Of what really is a big worry versus what isn't. That kind of thing. And it's more concerning when a love issue is not addressed. That's not a small issue. A love issue is always a big issue, right? We need to get perspective of that too. Many of you in your addictions, you go, it's just a little addiction. Not seeing as every addiction is a love issue and therefore it's a monster issue. Yeah. Does that make sense? So if I've got an addiction where I impose on Mary my demands, and I got that, and somebody points out to me, and I go, but that's really small, she puts up with that, she can handle that kind of thing, and I have that kind of attitude. I'm not seeing the monster in the room, which is the badness of my beliefs about love is now impacting even upon a person that I say I love, right? How is it going to impact on a person that I don't care about? I'm going to be completely clueless about how that's affecting them. And so we've got to get perspective.
It's like in that analogy, you might be sad because mummy didn't love you.
Yeah, or might be sad because mummy like over pampered me, and now I'm just a spoilt brat, and now I'm going to demand that of Mary, Yeah.
But what we tend to do in our sinful state is say, yes, but those issues with my mother are very big, and they're, they're very hard for me to deal with.
We treat them like monsters.
We treat them like they're the mountain, and then we engage in the addiction and say, but that's not that much. And we've got the perspective wrong. We've got the truth wrong. Actually, what we do with our own free will is the thing that God measures the most. This is what creates our soul condition. Yep. The choices we make, the actions we take, the emotions we hold on to, the addictions we engage. But often we say, the emotions I'm holding on to, that's just too big to deal with, and this is nothing that I'm putting out on other people. When God sees it the other way, God's saying, wow, you've got the choice just to feel some sadness. Give up your feeling of entitlement. That's a small thing in your journey in terms of your capacity for growth and understanding. What you're doing to other people in that action, in that
is big.
Self-righteous avoidance of that emotion, now that's quite big. That's quite significant, not just for you, but for other people. So this is the wonderful way that God's designed it that causes us to have self-responsibility, but we, if we're going to engage sincerely, are going to see that dynamic, and we're going to go, okay, what's the ant emotion that I'm justifying, and actually, what is my impact? How am I using my will with other people? Yeah.
And if I've got God's view of love, I'll see all that really easily. But if I've got the world's view of love, it's really murky. It's hard to see these things because everybody sort of has the idea, oh, well, it's okay to have some addictions with your partner. You know, the reason why I'm in a relationship is that Mary makes me feel good about myself, you know, and I make her fear go away, and, you know, and this is all good. And, you know, we treat that, oh, that's my need, and this is the way I love. And no, it's not the way you love, it's the way your evil love works, you know, but we want to tell ourselves it's the way we love. And so what we end up doing is we end up putting demands on the other person and also acceding to their demands ourselves in this sort of codependence, each agreeing that our version of love now is valid, and also my partner's version and your version of love is valid under certain circumstances, rather than just going, is it valid from God's perspective or not? Yes or no? If it's not valid from God's perspective, I'm out of harmony, I'm in my evil. I'm in my evil process, and I need to address that if I want to be a more loving person. Now, receiving God's love helps you do that, because by receiving God's love, now that you have part of God's love in you, you're now internally comparing that with what is loving in terms of what you do. Does that make sense? So that you've got some measure now of the standard of love versus your standard. Right? And it's internal, it's not external anymore, because you've received some of God's love, it's internal. And then it becomes, what are you going to do with that? Are you going to make the choice to continue with your evil version, or are you going to accept this new version? And that is also an internal choice that needs to be made. It's not something that, like, you can have people telling you what love is, and you won't believe them. You won't. Because your version of love is saying differently for the most part. And your version of love has a lot of attachments and a lot of addictions associated with it. And as a result, it ends up that way, where you're just demanding that your version of love is met, right? Now, unless we change that, the things like I just mentioned earlier, the destruction of the environment, that's not going to change, because our version of love needs to change before the destruction of the environment can change. Yeah, it's what we think is loving. See, the average person on earth thinks it's loving to demand of the environment everything you want, not just need, but want, throughout the course of your life until you die. And the irony of it should not be missed on us, even intellectually, that when you die, you don't have any of it anymore. It's like that should be a part of our consideration. You're not going to have any of it anymore. If you can't hand down what you did to somebody else, and I don't mean your family, I mean anybody, if you can't hand down the majority of what you've created and the majority of what you've purchased and the majority of what you've done to somebody else, then all of it's going to go in landfill. That applies to all your clothes, all your goods, all your cars, vehicles, all your house, everything you currently think is a part of your necessity to build your worth. All of that is going to disappear in the moment of your passing. And you will no longer, you will still maybe feel attached to a lot of it, but nobody else around you is going to be, because they're all on earth. You know,
they don't realise how special that
this?
brooch is that you bought in 1984 with your first pocket money. They're like,
yeah.
Oh.
Why did Dad have that crappy car all of his life? Get rid of that. You know, that kind of thing. And they're just going to go and get something new, most probably. And all of the so-called wealth you generate, none of it has helped your soul. Not a single ounce of it. And this is what most people find when they pass, is that they think they're going to pass, if they believe in this at all, they think they're going to pass and everything will be sort of, you know, and particularly people with faith, they believe that, because I'm a Christian and I pass, all of my sins will be sort of rubbed out in that moment. You know, there's an actual scripture in the Bible, in Romans, it says, he who dies has been acquitted of his sin. So actually, the Bible itself suggests that as soon as you die, you have no longer sin, right? None of that is true. None of that's true. You're going to be asked to look at your life and see the sin. And a part of the sin is every time we were unloving, we chose to do something unloving, and that unloving choice has had an impact, not just on our life, but on the lives of everyone who comes after us. Right? All of your children are going to be impacted by your sin. All of the environment that you lived in is going to be impacted by your sin. So the more loving we can become, you sort of want to get to the stage where you lived a life on earth and there's been barely any impact of you being there.
Well, the impact you want to have had is positive.
Well, I mean, from a physical perspective.
Yeah. No, from a physical perspective, I want there to be more trees that have been planted by the time I pass than more that I've consumed. Yeah. I know what you meant.
Yeah. You want to leave it in a better condition than you found it, rather than in a worse condition than you found it. Yeah? And if you have that focus, that's a loving focus, to leave something in a better condition than you found it. So you get a bad car and you do it up. Well, that's a loving focus to a degree, because you're leaving it in a better condition than when you found it, right? Even though it's a car. It'd be better if it was a trees or a block of land or something, and you got it and you put it in a better condition than when you found it, where everything can survive. At the moment, there's so much focus on humans and so little focus on everything else that we're losing species by the hundreds every day, and we're talking species like of insects and plants and animals. Every day we're losing them, and hardly any of us even give it a second thought in the course of our day, right? And this is where it demonstrates our unloving condition, and it should demonstrate our unloving condition to ourselves. And then, of course, if we can look at that and then look at our discussion yesterday and go, wow, if I could be more loving, then that won't happen anymore around me. I will make that different. And so this is why in Australia, with our block of land that we've got, we've been in this constant improvement program. Constant. It's gone from having 2 birds, 2 species of birds, to 40 species of birds permanently in that time, right? And it's still, in Australia, there's 800 species of birds. It's still got a long way to go. Does that make sense? Before it can support that kind of, like, congestion of species. But we can do it. We're intelligent people, and if we love, we can make intelligent choices that are loving, and we can do it.
And when we love, it's a pleasure to do those things. It's not a duty or a guilt-ridden thing. It's a pleasure. It's something you feel excited about doing. Yeah. So that's why, receiving the love first and growing ourselves in love, it makes everything else easier. Yeah.
So I can't emphasize enough the practical benefit of being more loving. Does that make sense? And it's one of the, as you guys know, those of you who've known us for a while, the reason why we travel and teach these things is because we know how love will change everything. We've experienced it in our own life, but also and in our own environment, not just our personal life emotionally and relationship or any of that. Spiritually, you feel the benefit, but you also get all the benefits physically. There are all additional benefits that occur just from bringing life into more love. Yeah.
Billy?
Billy?
The back there, yep.
Okay.
Hey, Jesus, Mary. I hopefully can get past this fear.
Yep, now you're in addiction, Billy. Just say what you want to say.
I want to ask about the homework you set us yesterday.
Sorry,
the homework you set us yesterday.
Yes, good.
I noticed that the desire is a really important part of getting God's love to flow into the soul, right?
Yep.
I'm really finding that I've got a lot of block. I'm starting to feel a lot of the pain. I feel like that is the soul block that you were speaking about yesterday.
Yep.
And I'm finding I'm in and out of feeling that pain and in and out of feeling...
When you say pain, is it physical, emotional?
It's emotional pain.
Emotional, yep.
The soul pain in my heart.
Yep. What kind of pain, Billy?
Yeah, it's like just a block, like as if like there's a tightening on one of the veins inside my heart or something like that.
Yeah.
But it goes in and out of that, in and out of sexual feelings.
Yep.
And that's where I'm finding I'm just in between of those. And what I've come to answer the question that you set us.
Yep.
Can you just hold the mic a little bit
closer.
Sorry, is that better?
Yep.
Okay. What I find is the actual blockage to God's love is my desire for sex. I think that's actually what is causing the pain that I'm feeling now.
Yep.
And the feelings that I'm blatantly having, where I'm either feeling this pain or feeling some sort of sexual projections. And because I'm feeling those sexual projections, I'm like, my desire is, I like that.
Yep.
I actually like that. And so...
Yeah, can we just stop you for a moment?
Sure.
Yep. So when you read let's refer to the prayer, shall we, for a sec? If you come down to the third to last paragraph of the prayer.
Keep me in the shadow of your love.
Keep me in the shadow of your love every hour and every moment of my life, and help me to overcome all the temptations of the flesh and the influence of the powers of the evil ones who so constantly surround me, and endeavour to turn my thoughts away. They endeavour to turn my thoughts away from you and to the pleasures and allurements of the world. What we need to do is have a discussion about how your body versus your spirit body versus your soul works in terms of its pleasures.
Okay.
And one of those pleasures is your sexual pleasure.
Yeah.
Right? We need to have a discussion about all the influences that are upon these pleasures. So your body has been designed by God to have certain pleasures. So let's look at those pleasures. What are they? What brings you pleasure in your body?
Well, they're sexual organs.
So there's sexual organs, so there's sex, yeah.
Food.
Food, okay, yeah.
Exercise.
Exercise, yeah, brings you pleasure.
So movement, can we say movement?
So we can call it movement, but yeah, let's call it exercise, yeah.
Nothing else is coming to mind.
Nothing else comes to mind?
I've just give me a moment.
Well, that's a very fundamentally basic existence if it's just those three things, isn't it?
What gives me pleasure?
Sorry?
Is the question what gives me pleasure?
Yeah. Yeah, what brings actual...
In your body.
In your body.
Inside the body.
Pleasure.
There's a sense of love that I feel inside. The sense of peace, sense of joy that I feel inside.
Okay, so, but what causes it is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
See, if it's only those things that cause it, that's really interesting in a way, isn't it? Like, let's look at it. Let's look at it from a soul perspective. Here's my soul. So here's Billy's soul. Here's his body's spirit body, physical body, right? And the physical, this involves sensations, doesn't it? Or you could say senses.
Senses.
So you know how it's, we refer to as having 5 senses, but really, sex is like it's an interesting sense, isn't it? Because it involves not just sort of feelings, like it involves all sorts of things in your body, doesn't it? It's sort of quite strange, and it's the same when you get the sense of touch. Like sometimes you can be touched in one part of your body, and you're feeling it in other parts of your body where you're not getting touched. So what's happening there? There's all this referral in your nervous system to other parts of your body and so forth that goes on. None of these things are really considered very much. It's known medically, but most of us don't think, this is all... There's much bigger things going on here than just 5 senses.
No, they totally agree to that.
But let's look at the 5 senses. So food satisfies what senses?
But belly, the senses of hunger.
Well, no. Well, that's the underlying drive.
Right.
But it's not just hunger. Like you can smell you can be completely not hungry, smell a piece of fruit and go, I think I would like a bite. Can't you?
Yeah.
You can eat for enjoyment, not just for hunger.
So it's a desire. It's my desire for that.
Yeah. But what sense in your body? It's just.
My physical
You've
senses.
got 5 senses. Which
ones? The nose and the tongue.
So taste, that's a sense of...
Taste.
What are the senses? Let's write them down.
Yep. We got the...
Taste. Yeah. Smell. What else?
Touch.
Touch or feeling.
Hearing.
Sensory feelings. So touch, let's call it. Yeah, what else?
Your hearing.
Hearing and sight. They are generally referred to as our senses, aren't they?
That's right.
We see, hear, touch, smell, taste, right? Food, what senses?
Taste.
Taste, yes. What else?
Smell.
Taste and smell, yeah. Two senses. But what else?
Yeah,
Right. There are some foods you don't like eating not because of taste and smell, because of some other reason. The texture of it on your tongue.
That's sort of like the
and
touch part of it.
So that you could say that's also that, right? So it's got to satisfy, for it to be satisfying for you, it's got to satisfy those three senses at least, doesn't it? Right? Now, it's also interesting with fruit and stuff like that God's made, because you look at it and you go, oh, it just looks good too, doesn't it? Like, you got to admit. And, I know fruit, most of you can't hear the sound it makes, but it does actually make a sound. And you can hear it in your spirit body, but you can't, the frequencies are too different to your physical body for you to hear it there. But there are already 4 senses of your body, your physical senses in your body, that satisfy your desire to eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So, Dana, let's look at sex.
There's definitely an extra sense, I think, involved with sex.
Well, yeah, but of these 5, which ones do they satisfy? Touch? I reckon all of them.
All of them.
Okay. So sex, all of them. Okay. Exercise, what does that satisfy?
All of them? No. The feeling of the touch that you're feeling inside, that you're feeling...
Well, I suppose it depends where you exercise. If you exercise with somebody yelling at you saying, yeah, get onto it, blah, 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 and you need G'ing up, then that's not a nice environment and you're not going to enjoy a lot of exercise that way. But I enjoy when I'm exercising what I see, what I hear, what I touch and what I smell when I'm exercising. Does that make sense?
Because you're smelling like maybe you're running in the countryside and it just smells good.
Yeah, and you smell it, the different things. We've got different trees at home that give off a eucalyptus smell, you smell that, and you've got different other trees that give off like a honey smell, and you can smell that, and you get all these different sensations while you're walking, plus your physical body feels good, and you feel like, that you're benefiting yourself, you're and also, look at a person who exercises and look at one who doesn't. Which one looks better?
You feel better because you can feel when you're getting overweight, for example.
Yeah. When you get overweight, you don't look good. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course you don't.
You don't feel good either in
your
your
body.
Don't
feel good either
you can
about
feel
yourself,
physically,
emotionally.
well.
Or even physically.
But we're even just talking about the physical senses here. Already they don't feel good if you go to overweight, right? So, yeah. So here is so the point of what I'm trying to make with all that is, here is my physical body. It has physiological functions that are designed to bring me pleasure.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Of which these so-called senses are a part,
Right.
aren't they?
A part of the physical body, yeah.
Yeah. So here's my physical body. It's been specifically designed to bring me pleasure. And by the way, your spirit body also has been specifically designed to bring you pleasure in the spirit world. And it also has a superset, in other words, it has more senses that will bring you pleasure. If it doesn't, and in some places where it doesn't have more, it just has a greater scope. So in other words, sense of sight it still has, so you can still see in the spirit world, but you see more. You can see longer distances. Here when you get on top of a mountain, you look over a whole mountain range, you'd be lucky, unless the mountains are like Mount Everest and you're looking all over, you're lucky to see like 50 kilometres. What's that for you, about 30 miles? In the spirit world, you can get on top of a mountainside and see 1,000. Right?
That's interesting. Though.
Yeah, because your sense of sight has the ability to zoom in and out more, and also it's got a lot of different features that you don't have in your physical body. And the eye can't be designed, the physical body's eye can't be actually designed to have the same features.
Well, that's why we use telescopes and stuff like this.
That's right. That's why we design telescopes and microscopes and all these other things, because our eyesight can't have the ability to create those same sensations, right? But the design of those things came from the spirit world. People in the spirit world go, we could help them have that experience by helping them with the design of a telescope or helping them the design of a microscope. Or, do you understand?
Right.
So a lot of inspiration comes from the spirit world, helping people come to the idea of why don't you design a telescope?
I feel that way. Sometimes I'll make music and I'm like,
Yeah.
this was not my...
Yeah. So we need to understand that actually a lot of the different tech that we've developed on Earth has been specifically gifted from the spirit world to help you to help you understand that these things are available to your body in the spirit form without you needing tech.
Without needing tech.
Yeah. Okay. So the spirit body has this superset of senses. Physical body has a set of senses. Now, in the Paget messages, when you read them, because most of you haven't, right? But when you read them, you will see that they are called your animal sensations. Now, why are they called your animal sensations? So this is referred to in the spirit world as the animal body. It's an animal. Right? An animal should indicate to you that it has no soul. This by itself, if it didn't have a soul attached to it, would have no soul, right?
Right.
Right. What determines whether you love or not?
My soul.
Okay, so your soul determines whether you love, not your bodies. So if your soul drives the desires of your bodies, they are going to be in harmony with love, right?
Right.
If you're loving, they will be, the desires of the bodies will be harmonious with love. If your soul is injured in love, its injuries will drive the bodies. So the animal has a desire to procreate, and it's been designed to have a desire to procreate so that it procreates, right? That's necessary for the incarnation of new children to occur. That desire for sex is in the soul. It's not a flawed desire. So all these people who say to become a spiritual person you need to be celibate, that's not true, right? To become a spiritual person you need to bring the way in which you desire to satisfy your sexual desires into harmony with love.
That's exactly where I'm stuck with. I understand that.
Yep.
My desire for sex is actually what God designed, but my desire for...
Well, no, you've let it be what the animal desires.
Right, okay. That's where I'm struggling.
And by the animal, when we were talking about that in the Paget message, we're referring to the animal who's influenced by the temptations of the flesh. So when we said that line, the temptations of the flesh, in the Paget messages, right, we're referring to the temptations that the animal has where the soul doesn't have control. You follow?
I'm not following. I'm trying to, but I want to.
You're allowing the temptations of the flesh to dominate how your soul acts.
How is that possible?
Well, you let yourself sexually project, which is a desire for sexual interaction. It's an emotional and physical desire for sexual interaction, and you're letting it dominate you.
How can I change that?
Sorry?
How do I change that? How do I
Well, yet, if you say quiet enough, I can explain.
Sorry.
The problem, the reason why I'm pointing that out is that in the Paget messages, you'll read these lines which talk about the animal part of you and allowing the animal part of you to dominate. In the Paget messages, there's a whole series of messages about sin and what creates it. And a part of it is letting what you believe to be a need in your physical body dominate your soul eventually. And you do that because your soul is flawed in love. Because your soul sort of believes, I just need to, I become centric to my body. In other words, what I say is, what my body needs, I'm going to give it. Now, this is a common thing for men with sex. What my body needs, I'm going to give it, so I don't care who I have sex with, how many times I have sex, you know, what's going on with sex, as long as I get it, I'm happy. Right? Many men have that view. In fact, it's a common saying by men, well, men have that need. Many of you have even explained away bad behaviour from men by saying that men have that need. Right? Now, men have that so-called need for two reasons. One is the body has been designed for sexual pleasure, as has the spirit body, as has the soul. So inside of the design, there is a design that God wanted you to experience sexual pleasure. He did. So that's one reason why you have it. The other reason why you have the need that is out of harmony with love, in other words, evil, is because there's no love driving these desires. There's just the need. There's no assessment of what is loving versus what is unloving inside. Now, you want to think, and this is how most men are, they want to think that if it's not instinctual, most men blame it on instinct and just say it's men, that's the way we've been made. You know, women don't seem to need it as much. By the way, that's not actually true, but many women feel more injuries in different ways that cause them to feel like they don't need it as much. It's not actually true, but the problem with most men is we're going, I want it, so I should get it. I've been taught from childhood that I should get whatever I want. I'm more important than a woman. You've been taught that from childhood by your own mothers, actually, most of you. An example of that is your own mother brought you up, and let's say you're in a family where there's a girl and a boy. Did you have to do as much housework as the girl? No. There you go. You've been brought up to believe that men are superior.
My uncle saying you're going to inherit everything when I have a cousin who's older than me, and she was like blatantly would have been inherited everything if.
Sorry, I'm not following you.
Sorry, my uncle he was saying.
Can we not address your personal life too much? Yes. I'm trying to give you a structure for you to understand yourself in. Do you follow?
I follow.
Yeah. What you're trying to do is, a lot of my comments you will understand a connection to, and I'm trying to tailor it for you already anyway, based on my feelings, but you got to just be really careful of this self-indulgent thing, oh yeah, my experience was this and my experience was that. No, fundamentally there's a principle absent inside of your soul, a principle of love that's not there. You follow? When it comes to sex, when it comes to the temptations of the flesh. And then the allurements of the world nowadays offers you lots of ways, sinful ways, to address this temptation. Mm-hmm. Pornography it offers you. Many women are willing to have sex with you without love being involved, and you're willing to have sex without love being involved too. So the world offers you that as well. The world offers you the ability to live in a facade with women. In other words, make out you're a nice guy when really the principle of love inside of your soul is not there, and actually you're quite evil with the way you treat women. And it offers you this ability to present yourself as a nice person while, there's actually evil within. To falsify ourselves in our interactions with others, right? It offers us that potentiality as well. The world itself, the way the pleasures and the allurements of the world are operating is to feed your addictions. So when you have an addiction, that's why it feels so easy to satisfy them, because the world has been designed by everyone who came in advance of you for thousands of years. It's been designed to feed the addictions of the individual as much as possible, right? Okay, so this is why this paragraph is so important, because it's identifying so many problems that we face in our relationship with God. See, what fundamentally happens is we go, but I want these things. I want them. How can I get what I want and still be loving? No, the question is, really, I need to be loving, and then I will get what I really want.
That's exactly true.
Does that make sense? Most of us are going the other way. We're basically saying, how can I get what I want and still be loving? And this causes you to falsify your loves. And what I mean by that is to fake them. It causes you to make out that you're loving when you're not, right? But if your focus is, I want to be what God defines as love to be, and then whatever comes my way, and I always make the love decision first, then my whole behaviour and my whole life will change, and also I will dominate my sin rather than my sin dominating me.
So developing that desire to have God's principles inside of me.
Which are all based around love and truth, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yep. So in other words, I need to face the truth. One truth is, my mummy mummied me, and that turned me into this guy who thinks that women should mummy me.
Absolutely.
Right? That's a truth. That's also an injury. It's unloving for you to be mummied. There should be no demand on any woman around you to mummy you, whether they're a woman older than you or a partner of yours. And many men have children and they get their children to mummy them as well, right? Or even their children, they get mummied by their children, right? Most men have been taught to have this sort of attitude. It's a huge sin that causes a lot of trouble on earth, right? And we've got to start seeing the principle, but we're not going to see the principle without receiving love. So the question is, how can I change it? By receiving more love. That's how you change it. By receiving more of God's love, you'll be able to see, wow, that's a big sin. Without receiving God's love, you're going to just think it continues on to be not a sin. But also, to receive God's love, you're going to have to see that it is a sin. But you don't at the moment.
If you think back to our conversation yesterday where we were talking about opening our heart, at the moment your heart is very closed on this issue. Your heart is like, no, I want to have sexual validation from women. I don't care if it's a spirit or a person on earth. I want that sexual validation, which is why the spirits come to you when you are quote unquote longing or trying to emulate prayer, let's say. Your primary desire is to have that validation, and that's why that attraction is happening. So the laws are operating to show you the issue, and as yet you don't have the desire to see it, one, as a sin, emotionally, to feel it as a sin. And so your heart remains closed.
I feel that pain right now. I think is that the pain? Is that not the pain?
No, you feel the pain of not having a relationship, not having sex.
Right. That's the pain then.
That's different to feeling the pain of this is a sin, what I want. What I want is a sin.
The way I want it, not what you want.
Well, yeah.
I'm really trying to
understand.
Figure out
we'll help. We'll try to help. So what I've been saying, so let's get back to this discussion a bit, right? Because you need more information. So this body has its, you could call it its natural or instinctual desires. This body has its natural or instinctual desires. They've been created to have them, right? There's a whole heap of chemical processes, nervous system processes and everything in order to make them function and happen. And the information gets passed through the silver cord down the body stream to the next body and then to the soul. So you've got a cord here joining those two bodies together, and information gets passed, and then you've got a cord here connecting the bodies with the soul, and information gets passed so that your soul has an experience. That's how it works, right? But what happens is we become on earth very addicted to the experience without considering love. And that's what's happened for almost all of you with regard to all of your interactions. It's a natural process on earth for it to occur this way when you're not educated in love. And you think about it. How many of you went to school and learned about love? No? Nobody, right? Nobody even thought to teach you it, did they? Not a single person who you were taught by or educated by, up until you met me, nobody thought to teach you about how love works. Isn't that true?
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. Now, you look back at your childhood. When did your parents teach you about love?
They didn't. They thought they did.
They sort of did, didn't they, by their behaviour?
It was very addictive behaviour.
That's right. Their own version of it, they acted in, and in the process of acting in it, they taught you act the same as me, pretty much. Or when they're yelling at you, don't act the same, whatever. They taught you a number of things, but they didn't teach you what love was because they personally weren't educated either. So the problem we've had on earth is that nobody for millennia, right, has taught about love. I was the first person on this earth to teach about love in the first century. But that was, before then there was 170,000 years of people and nobody taught anybody about love.
The Adam and Eve, they was in the same condition as you when...
Sorry?
Adam and Eve were in the same condition as you, but they just made the choice...
But they decided not to learn about love from God, that God was the only person that could teach them.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks, Yura.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we are all starting with you could say an impediment. Nobody has taught us about what love is. We've had to learn it from experience. And the trouble with most of our experiences is most of them were unloving in our childhood, right? Very few of them were loving. Well, you could say there was a mixture of love with a lot of unlove, and a love and a lot of unlove. And so this creates even more confusion. Like, what is loving, what isn't loving? I think that is loving, but I don't really know. And so you end up being an adult without understanding love at all. So what you're taught fundamentally by your parents is to satisfy the temptations of the flesh.
I was just about to say, this feeling for wanting pleasure.
Wanting
pleasure.
Yep.
Is what makes me believe I'm doing a loving thing for myself.
That's right. Yep. And most people only do what brings them pleasure because they think that that's loving themselves, right? And they don't consider the effect or negative effects that their desire for pleasure is having on everything else. In other words, they don't consider love. They don't consider loving others, the environment, God, each other, persons, even partners. Very, very few of you actually love your partners, right? You're in addiction with your partners and therefore not loving them, right? To love your partner, you need to break the addiction and also get God's version of what love does with each other. That's what needs to happen. And that's not going to happen without education, but the majority of us have not been educated. So I'm not saying that you're bad people because you're terrible, you don't love. What I'm saying is it's a sad situation. You have not been educated.
No one has ever discovered God within themselves and...
That's right.
The process
We've only ever taught on earth what other people have taught, and because what other people are taught is flawed versions of love, that's all we're going to get taught. And we're not even taught it. We just learn it through experience because there's no school saying, here's our flawed version of love, that's what you need to view, is there? There's no school even thinking of doing that. There's just like no discussion. You went to school, what, 5 years of age?
I think 5.
Yeah. Preschool, 4, is it? Something like that? Yeah. And when did you finish? About 18 or 17 or something like
16.
that before you went to university? You went to university, some of you went to university, you get up, what you're up to about 21 by now, is it? Yep. When did somebody teach you about love in that entire time? All of your informative years, all of the years that were going to define the rest of your life. Not a single person thought to teach you about it.
We had religion. There was religion. You listen to that and you...
Yeah, what does religion teach you? It teaches you to say love, but it doesn't teach you about love.
It teaches you
what they think love is. It's just another construct of teaching you their version of it, right? You think about science, it does the same. It teaches you that version of it. Well, it's all survival of the fittest. We don't have to care about love. We just strive for the struggle of survival. That's that version of love. That's a very prevalent version now, isn't it, of love, the whole scientific process, right? Then you've got the religious view. I just follow these rules and you'll be loving, right?
It never works.
Never works, no. And most people who are religious, how do you feel in their company? Pretty unloved, right? Most of them lecture you, pester you, push you, rave on at you, right? Yeah. Without you even inviting them to, right? Many of them even knock on your door. It's like I used to do. Once I started receiving God's love again, I'm going, I can't do that anymore. It physically distressed me to do it. Because I knew I was impacting the will of others, therefore not being loving anymore. I didn't even think of it like that initially, and then I realised why. I realised, wow, what I've been doing, I was taught to do this up until I was 33 years of age, and I used to do it every week, for 3 days a week. And that entire time I was unloving. And I didn't even consider how I was just forcing my will on other people by doing it, right? That's how most religions are, aren't they? You go to a Muslim country, isn't it the same? What are they forcing the girls to do? Cover up, do this, do that. What are they forcing the men to do? 6 times a day, 5 times?
5 times a day.
5.
5?
Men and women.
Men and women. 5 times a day. You got to, it's like you can't talk to God constantly. You need a time of the day to do it, right? And these kind of teachings are forcing people into things, and therefore very unloving. And if you had any connection with God at all, you would feel how unloving it is, right? When you're there in these environments, like that's why when we were in Belgium and there was ding, ding, ding from the church bells in the entire, city, every hour from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, forcing the intention that we all use one of our senses to remind ourselves that they are holy. The people who are dinging the bell, right, are holy, right? Very out of harmony with love, right? Okay, so we've been taught from the time we were conceived through emotional experiences, and then after we were born through physical ones as well as emotional experiences, we've been taught everything else but love, right? That's been our experience. So this is why you need to not be so harsh on yourself about where you're at, right? Because at the end of the day, nobody's taught you. But now you have an opportunity to be taught. The key thing is, okay, who's going to do the teaching?
God.
Well, that's my opportunity. My opportunity is that God can teach me. And what I'm trying to share with you is how God does that. Make sense? So when we get back to this, we can see that firstly, because we haven't been taught about love, we have been totally focused, our entire focus of our entire life, probably up until this point, has been the equation, and we've talked about this many times before, the equation between pleasure and pain. What you do is you get as much pleasure as you can while at the same time to avoid as much pain as you can. And most people call that life. So let's get back to things you enjoy. The things you enjoy, for most people, it is only those things. Everything else is hardly considered at all. For some people, there's other things, but they're all emotions, not physical senses. They're things like power. Some people enjoy that, right? Yep. And that's not based on senses anymore, is it? That's based on emotions, what they get from their power. You follow?
I follow.
Yep. So some people, they spend their entire life just working for money, so they enjoy money. They love money. Many of you love money more than you love people, right? If you're honest with yourself, when you've got an opportunity to help a person with your money, you go, I don't know whether I should. Right? Love would say, of course I should. It's how I help them that's going to matter, right? But I need to help them. If I got money to help and money could help, then help them with money. Yep. Many of us love money so much we want to accumulate it to the point that when we die we have millions of it. I remember people I met many, many times who had, that's their whole goal in life was. You know, when I became a property developer, that was almost becoming my goal. Just get more money, then I'll be able to do other good things. How many of you told yourself that? If I just get the right job and the right situation, the right money, then I will be able to help others. Now, if you love, you don't go, I'm going to wait until I love. You know what I mean? Wow. So already that's a flaw. That's a flaw. But this is where we go. So power, money, and other things. We'll talk about some other things as we go today, maybe. But these things are more emotional satisfactions that make me feel good. All based around what I measure to be my worth.
Are these blockages then to receiving God's love?
Of course, all of them are. That's why in the Paget message it says, turn me away from and overcome the temptations of the flesh and the influence of the powers of the evil ones who endeavour to turn my thoughts away from God to the pleasures and allurements of the world. Right? You have got so much pressure on you from spirits and from your own inclinations to turn to the pleasures of the world. You've been taught from a baby to turn to the pleasures of the world. Nobody taught you any different the entire time. Nobody taught you the disadvantages of that kind of life. Nobody's taught you what's wrong with it. They've only taught you what's right with it. Right? And they haven't taught you that actually you can have a lot of pleasure by doing things God's way. In fact, God designed you to have the most pleasure by doing things God's way. And they didn't tell you anything about the penalties that you experience physically, emotionally, sexually, and spiritually from doing things out of harmony with love. So let's be honest with ourselves about sexual pleasure. What pains are here now as a result of sexual pleasure, so-called?
STDs.
Right, STDs. Right. Any of you have had one?
Yep.
Right? You'll know they don't feel good.
Nope.
Yeah? Okay, so there's STDs. What else?
What are the other pains?
What are the other
Breakup?
pains? Sorry? Let's just maybe have the mics, eh? Mary can do it while I've got my back
so if
turned.
we go to
So we've got what did I just say? STDs, yeah. Sexually transmitted diseases, yep. Infidelity.
Yep, Rebecca. Bex. He's done it, yep. So then if we go to Charlotte. Mic runners, choose a side.
Choose a side, just let the
stand
mic
at the
come
back,
down.
Yep.
Whoever's got their hand up.
So Charlotte here with her hand up in the white T-shirt.
Yep.
Abortions?
Abortion, yep. Mm-hmm. Is that because of sex?
Maxing.
Unwanted pregnancies, should we say?
Mm.
How many children are even born unwanted? And what do they feel when they're born unwanted? You know, we don't consider the cost of that, do we? You know, you're having sex, you're not thinking, there's a potential of having a child here, and if I don't want a child right now when I'm having sex, then, you know, what am I doing to prevent the conception? I'm thinking, I just want some pleasure. The average person, that's the way they think. So they're not thinking about how the child will feel when it's unwanted, let alone how it's going to feel when it's aborted. What else?
Child sexual abuse, rape.
Okay, yeah. So having sex with people who don't really want it or are not even developed enough to understand it.
Yeah.
Yep. So what would we call that? Really, it is rape and abuse, isn't it? Yeah. This is all the results of focusing on the pleasure alone without having any love involved, right? What else?
Go to Tim.
Shame.
Shame, yeah. Why does the shame come?
Well, there can be two reasons.
Right.
one of them when you do something unloving or when you act unloving to someone else?
Okay, there's sort of like an internal conscience system, isn't there? That when you know you've done something and it feels really bad that you did it, there's the shame that comes from that. So you could call that guilt, right? In the sense that you did something wrong and you are guilty, that kind of statement. So there's guilt that comes from it as well. What else?
When someone like rapes you or abuses you, you feel ashamed.
Correct. When you're on the receiving end of any kind of sexual abuse, and I'm not just talking about physical sexual abuse, I'm talking about even emotional sexual abuse. It causes people on the other end of it sometimes to feel like they are to blame for it. And in fact, the abusers frequently say to the abused, you are to blame. I did that because of you wanted it. That kind of thing. Oh, you really wanted to be strangled while we had sex. You really wanted to be, you know... Man, I can't think off the top of my head what.
You really wanted to have sex, you know? A lot of times abusers say you wanted to have sex when it was
really the abuser who did, that kind of thing. And so, so that causes the person on the receiving end of this abuse to feel ashamed, and often for the rest of their life because they don't know how to deal with it, right? I was a member before I realised who I was a member of this group in Australia called the Adult Advocates of Childhood Abuse. In other words, it was a non-profit organisation that talked to people who had been abused sexually, and almost everybody I listened to the story of in that setting, and there were hundreds of people, by the way, who had stories to tell about that. Every single one of them didn't know how to deal with their shame. Every single one of them. They were still in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and some of it had been in that organisation for over 20 years, and they still felt as ashamed as the day the abuse occurred when they related their experience. That's how bad it is, right? So there's also, yes, the carried shame as the receiver of the abuse, yeah?
Yep. Chris?
So we're talking about the negative effects of having sex without love.
A kind of perverted sex?
Yes, so things like...
Sadomasochism.
Sadomasochism, what's that called? S&M? Also, isn't there, for many, there's a distorted view of even who they are. Some people think they're gay when they're not. Some people think they're straight when they're not. Some people think, they're
bisexual.
They're bisexual, but a lot of it is because of different sexual experiences they've had during childhood and different projections they've had from parents and people in society that have caused them to believe that while they were growing up, right? So they don't even have a definite sense of their own sexuality as to what their attraction is, right? So these, you could say all of this is the penalty that society is experiencing, and there's a lot more, isn't there? All of this is the penalties that society is experiencing for not having loving sex. Does that make sense? That's the penalties. We're not measuring it. See, when we're in the state of just wanting pleasure, what we're doing is we're basically going, I just want my pleasure. I want it how I want it. There's certain things bring me pleasure and I want them how I want them. We're not saying, but what is the long-term effect of this desire on everybody, including me, everybody around me? What's the long-term effect?
We didn't even talk about in marriages where people are together, they're having sex, they don't love each other, and what impact that has on their children and what their children believe love is and what their children believe a good relationship is.
And the whole idea you've got to stay with someone you're not attracted to because you're married to them, all that, it causes all sorts of societal issues just because we're not loving when we would desire sex. If we were loving, none of those things would happen, actually. None of them. If you were loving, even the person you want to have sex with, you could feel she doesn't want to when there's certain times or he doesn't want to, and you would not feel like even raising it. right? If you were loving, you would be sensitive enough to know, yeah, I can feel not the right time.
Not like, you don't love me because you don't have sex with me.
And then have arguments about that. Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't even have the demand on the other person to satisfy your need, right? Very sadly, in the Bible, there's a scripture that says a wife's role, right, is to satisfy the needs of her husband. Who do you think wrote that?
Wasn't it?
Was it God? Definitely not God, right? Definitely a man. Yep. Okay.
She added an adjective.
Sorry.
That's it.
What was the adjective?
A horny man.
A horny man. Right. Okay. Yeah. No, not a horny man. Like I'm horny plenty times, but I don't do that. Right. So yeah. Okay. What else?
And not experiencing love can be a negative compensation of this unloving sexual drive, not feeling love.
Loved. And needing sex as a way to feel like you're loved. Yep. So it even gets down now to, so now we're looking, so these things here, those down to there, you could say, are sort of physical things, aren't they? That happen as a result of unloving sex. Here, there's a group of emotional things that happen as a result of unloving sex. There is, by the way, a whole heap of things that are sexual that happen because of unloving sex. And there's also a whole heap of things that are spiritual that happen because of unloving sex. Right? And we haven't even listed those. But when you get God's view of love, you know in your heart what they are. Right? Do you want an example? Okay. Spiritual thing that happens because of unloving sex. You believe your sexual needs are more important than your spiritual life. And so you'll sacrifice love for the sake of sex. That's a spiritual problem. Right? A person who loves does not sacrifice love for sex. In other words, they don't have sex with anyone they don't love, right? And don't have sex with anyone they don't want to love forever. Just a thought. Then there's the sexual things that happen because of the love issue. Sexual things, emotional sexual things that happen. You start sort of, you get to see enough, like an example, porn. You get to see enough bodies that now every woman that you're comparing with some person you've seen. And you're comparing them physically with the person you've seen. And if they don't match your requirements physically, then you don't feel attracted. Now, one of those persons might be your soulmate, but it makes no difference to you, right? There's also the emotional part of that, which is like, I'm now willing to share my sexual energy with anyone. So that means when I've got an opportunity to share my sexual energy with anybody, someone down the road or whatever, someone who looks attractive or whatever, I'll do it without consideration of the long-term spiritual and emotional effects on the person or myself. Right? So they're all sexual and spiritual ramifications that are all hurtful. Because in the long term, what's going to happen is you get so numb to the specialness of sex that you start treating it like it's just a normal thing that you can demand from anyone. Right? It's a unique thing God's designed, particularly for the soulmate relationship. But we don't think of it that way. Right? So, there's a lot of problems, is what I'm saying. Principally, all of those problems boil down to one problem. I have not been taught to be loving when it comes to sex. And I have no idea what love is when it comes to sex. Now, that gets back to yesterday's conversation. who's going to teach me to be loving about sex? Is anybody on earth you know going to teach you to be loving about sex? I mean in your day-to-day life. The average person doesn't even want to talk about sex, let alone teach you how to be loving about it, do they? Like, they're either embarrassed or they got their own stuff going on, or they've got, there's a lot of like really weird emotions attached to sex as well. And the average person doesn't want to teach you anything about it, or if they do, what do they want to teach you? Do it more with more people. That's what they want to teach you. Yeah, right. Do it more unlovingly. Let's it go through the tantric experience and do it more unlovingly is really what they want to teach you, right? And how many people in that environment do you see that are really happy? Their whole lives become like driven by sex alone. And they don't hardly experience any pleasure unless it's sexual. Right? And this is because of all the spirits now get involved in it. You see, part of that verse said, part of that line said, and the influence of the powers of the evil ones who so constantly surround me. Why? Because they're trying to get the same feelings you're trying to get, and they're trying to get it through you because they can't get it where they are. Right? So not only do you have to contend with your own sin, but now because of your own sin, you're also contending with the sins of others influencing you through your own sin. Right? And this is where things go, right? Things get pretty heavy then. Can you feel how heavy you feel when I say how heavy they get, right? It's, oh, God. There's not only me and my feelings to contend with, but there's also the feelings of the people who surround you that you invite into your life, either spiritually or physically, that also you have to contend with this. You see, the average person on earth believes sex at any cost is fine, because pleasure at any cost is fine. So they believe that. And so that's where they're going to encourage you to go, right? And they don't see anything wrong with that. The average person doesn't see anything wrong with that because they themselves have never been educated in love either, to know that there's so many things wrong. And what I find very interesting, though, is nobody properly measures the cost, the negative, unloving cost, the painful cost. Nobody sees that cost as a direct result of the unloving act. They sort of see it as, it's a pity we've been designed that way, right? Pity we've been designed to get STDs. God must have made a flaw there. Maybe there is no God, because that does, doesn't make sense to me. Like, we should be able to have sex and pleasure whenever we want and not worry about STDs. And in fact, what is science doing now? Medical science is creating drugs so you don't have to worry about STDs. That's the purpose of these drugs, isn't it? So that you can continue having the same kind of unloving sex without needing to bear the consequence of it, the painful physical consequence of having it. Right? So our whole society is governed towards negating the effects that God created as a part of an unloving act into negating every one of those so there is no penalty. Right? But remember we said yesterday, how do I change my desire? There was two ways. One was by focusing on something that's desirous and pleasurable, and the other one was by measuring the pain. You see what we do with sex? It's almost like we become so, what's the word?
Detuned, desensitized?
No, where you're so in a frenzy about the pleasure. Oh. What's that?
Driven, obsessed.
Obsessed, obsessed about the pleasure, that you fundamentally say there is no pain from it. Internally, you're sort of going, there's no risk of pain here. So one night stand, no risk of pain here. There's huge risks of pain in a one night stand. Huge risks.
I wouldn't even call them risks, I'd call them certainties of pain.
Probably certainties, yeah. Huge problems associated with it, but the average person is so obsessed with the need to have the sex that they completely detune from the actual consequences, spiritually, emotionally, sexually, and physically consequences. And this is the trouble with our addictions, is we don't face them. So this is the purpose of the prayer in this regard, is to try to help you face them. The way we stay in the shadow of God's love is to work through overcoming the temptations of our flesh, or you could call it our addictions, couldn't you? Work through our addictions and the influence of the powers of the evil ones. In other words, anybody around us who encourages to not be loving is evil. It's best to avoid them. Many of you purposefully associate with them because you like them one way or the other, or they're nice, engaging people or whatever. Sometimes they've got very lovely personalities, it seems, but they're encouraging you towards evil. It's not good for you to associate with them while they're doing that, right? But many of us still continue to associate with them. In fact, we're drawn to them because there's certain things we probably admire about them and their life and so forth. And then you've got to remember that there's this constant pressure on you from the world and from the spirit world to sort of turn your thoughts and your feelings away from God to what the world has to offer you. And most of you are experiencing that every day, right? The pressures of that world. Yeah, you think about your day-to-day life. How many times do you think to pray versus how many times do you think to watch telly? Or how many times you think to pick up your mobile phone and look at it? Like most people are now picking up their mobile phone. It's like every... we've been going for walks in Gloucester, we're staying, and going for walks. We do a 10k walk every day around about, and everybody's, looking at their mobile phone. They're not even looking at people anymore, right? Everybody, you go to a restaurant, what happens? You see families, a whole family at a restaurant. What is every member of the family doing? Scrolling their mobile phone, right? We are so addicted to those allurements that we're not considering even love of people and interacting with people and caring for people and all those things. We're just addicted. And the world is creating these more and more addictions so that you can be more and more distracted from yourself and from God. Philippa? Down the front.
Just on that topic, clearly something like pornography seems to be a huge problem in the world, and I just wondered what is driving that. Is that an intergender?
Yeah, a lot of unloving injuries, obviously. For women, a lot of it's about power. A lot of women involved in pornography want power over men, sexual power over men, and so they offer their bodies to be seen so they can get the feeling of sexual power over men. That's why people dance as strippers and things like that as well, because they want some kind of or some level of sexual power over men, right? And then on the other hand, the men want to, they have all sorts of emotions associated with it, don't they? Most of you men know what they are, don't you? Yeah, because many of you have them, right? There's all these, I want to see the woman's body. I want to fantasize about the woman's body. It brings me sexual pleasure to do that. I want to feel like she will do a degraded act for me so that I can feel like I'm powerful over her and so forth. And a lot of the women fake the thing to get power. And many of you guys accept the fake rather than the real as well. There's so many emotions. It's like we could go on for days about them. But all unloving, right? And naturally, the consequences are all unloving. Yep. the men and women involved in all of these things are corrupted, emotionally corrupted. Yeah. Now, the reality is too, when you become loving, you can look at porn and not have any feelings aside from, the sad thing that's going on there. There's many of our spirit friends in the celestial heavens who see and try to help the people involved in these kind of practices. They're not there to get some kind of personal pleasure out of it. They're there to help the person because they know the pain they're in. Yeah. But again, we very rarely see and even think about the pain. Frequently too, these kind of things where we're involved in pornography, the people involved in them are involved in drugs as well, and other things like trafficking, human trafficking, and all sorts of things start happening as well as a result of the demand, the unloving demand that men and women on earth, but a lot of men have about, their meeting their sexual pleasures. If we were truly honest with ourselves, we'd go, wow, that's a lot. It really behooves me then, is that the right word? If that's an old word. Do you all know what that means? No? It puts a demand on me, right, to actually reconsider my own attitude and my own emotions, my unloving emotions about sex. When I analyse the actual results on earth, we've got children like 12, 11 girls, little girls, 7, 8, 9, dressing provocatively now, aspiring to do that. We've got children sending their sexual photos of their sexual bits to other children, right? Because they can. We've got so many things going on now that, and all because nobody's taught love about sex, right? And we've got all these things going on that are now going on, and because of the tech, it's all easier, right? A whole lot's easier. There's even AI porn now, right? Where the AI generates the porn, so you get the perfect. You can make a perfect body to look at, not any flaws at all. Exactly how you want it to look. How is that going to distort your relationships with that gender in the future? There's so many things you can do now that just feed the addictions. Every one of those things is stopping your relationship with love and your relationship with God. Yep.
And also lots of the influence on platforms like social media, which are the people that are with OnlyFans and these sorts of accounts.
What was that one? OnlyFans. Oh, yeah, I heard about that the other day. Mary told me
which are then influencing the younger generation to think that that's a normal aspiration to have to make money.
Money and power. A lot of people nowadays feel like if I have money, I have power. So how I earn my money, show all my bits to everybody, but make them pay. Make them pay. How is that distorting my own view of sexuality? It's a major destruction of it, isn't it? Yeah. Psychologically, it does some very extreme things to a person's sexual part of themselves, to the soul. And this is why many, many people on earth have so much destruction and distortion about it, is because there's been so little education and no measuring. See, my feeling is that even if you just measured the bad results, you would have to pause, wouldn't you? But nobody does it. It's the same with, we create plastics. We don't measure the bad results. We have this attitude to all sorts of things, sex included, where we just ignore the bad results and hope for the good. Do you think anybody who's having a one-night stand is hoping for a bad result or seeing that there might be a bad result? For the most part, no. They're just hoping for the good, hoping that something will come of it. something positive, even if it's just their own pleasure without any consequence. There's no measuring of pain going on. And so what's going to happen, and you can see this happening in the world, there's going to be more pain. And more pain and more pain and more pain until, collectively, the world goes, we're sick of this pain. We're now measuring it because it's in our face and we can't avoid it. We're sick of it. We want to change it. In your personal life, the question I have for you is, when is that tipping point going to occur? Right? You can make it occur quite early, or you can wait until it's unbearable. Mm-hmm. You can do either. Yep. Perry?
And if we go to Rebecca at the back there.
And Rebecca's up the back. Yep.
I was just thinking a lot about how in the physical world, a lot of people try and make more loving decisions in their life, and they'll change because of, say, like this general love. But it seems like what you're trying to get to us in these talks is receiving the divine love, and it feels like not many of us have really experimented with that to then think, oh, I want to do that more. Whereas
Can I just go back to the first statement you made where you said a lot of people on earth are trying to make more loving decisions in a general sense. Do you think that's true?
Or maybe they're in pain and they're questioning, oh, maybe I've got to redirect.
Sure,
the
many
way
of
I
us
do.
have
Yes.
moments of pain, don't we?
Moments,
And we go, maybe I should question my actions
Could question
because of that.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily saying, oh, I want to take a loving action. It's sort of saying,
It's
I
more, I
want to
just
get
wanna-
out of pain.
That's right, I just want to avoid the consequences of my unloving actions.
That's
So
right.
there's two
Yeah.
parts to an equation of dealing with love. One is, do you just want to avoid the consequences of unloving? And the other is, do you want to love no matter what?
It's sort of like, you remember earlier we were talking about leaving the earth. You can either leave it without impact,
Yeah.
or you can leave it better
With a
than
positive one.
a positive one. Most people in their life, they're not thinking, how can I make my life and everybody else's life better than we've ever anticipated? I'm just like, I just don't want this pain, so I'd just like to get back to some kind of equilibrium.
Yeah.
And it's always personally measured too. It's not the other person's pain you're measuring, it's yours.
Yeah.
So it's selfishly motivated. So you're not saying, did I cause pain to someone else? It's only when it caused pain to me that I'll change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like what I wanted to ask as well is like the prayer to receive divine love. Like I'm not wanting to even initiate the prayer and then feel the benefit and go, oh, I want to do that more often.
Yeah, but firstly, you haven't received the benefit, so you don't know what it is.
Exactly,
But secondly, you haven't wanted to ask for love either, because you know it's going to, you know that it's going to confront all your temptations of the flesh that you want.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right? And you don't want that.
Yeah.
You don't want. Most people don't ask for God's love because they don't want God to have some kind of influence in their life that causes them to give up the things that they really, really love. Their evil loves. Mm-hmm. You understand? And there is a fundamental thing that you need to understand about human love. It is fundamentally got a problem with it, right? So the problem with God's love is there's no problem with God's love. And that's what most of us want. We want there to be a problem. We want there to be holes. We want there to be
special clauses.
Yeah. You know, I should get away with this here. You know, I should get away with that there, that kind of thing. If you really loved me, Mary, you'd let me get away with this.
You would understand.
Like, I need more sex than what you're giving me. If you really loved me, you'd let me have sex with someone else. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like, if she really loved me, she'd let me do that. That kind of feeling, right? Free will and all, right? That's the way we think. We sort of go, we're in this sort of process of going, as long as it's not causing me pain, that's all that matters, right? And when you think of human love, even in its most perfected form, so there are people in the spirit world, in the sixth sphere, that are perfect in human love, there's still the potential to degrade. There's still the potential to make a choice or decision that causes your own degradation in that place. When God's love is in you, because you're in alignment with God's love, the pain of doing something out of harmony with it is so great you don't even want to do it. Right? And the pleasure of being in harmony with the love is so great, why would you want to do it? Right? But when it comes to human love, it is prone to ebb and wane. So there's many times in the past, Perry, where you've said, I really love this girl. And then 6 months later, you're broken up and moving on to someone else. Right? Yeah, so did you really love the girl?
No.
And how long did it take you to break up and move on to someone else? A week? A couple of weeks? Like, if you really loved the girl, it'd take you years to sort it out. You know what I mean? Like years to deal with the emotions involved with the fact that, you know, she's gone. And also, if you really loved her, would you want to have sex with anyone else? No. Even if she doesn't want you, you wouldn't want to. Right? So, you can see God's standard, wow, it's sort of like, wow, that seems pretty like hard, right? That's the average person's thought. So I want what I want. If I'm going to ask God for love and then God's going to give me God's standard, and then all of a sudden God's standard goes, what you're doing, Perry, is wrong, and you're going, but I like it. What's going to happen? You're going to not want to ask, right? And this is one reason why many of us have not asked, because we're worried. We don't believe that a relationship with God brings bliss. We believe a relationship with God brings control. We believe a relationship with God brings harm. We believe a relationship with God places restrictions. You know what I mean? We believe that it's going to hurt our life rather than help it. So our faith is corrupt. We're saying, I believe that a relationship with God is going to be worse for me than not having one. And that is the fundamental bottom line as to why we don't pray. You follow?
Yeah.
The fundamental bottom line is my faith is such that I feel that it's not going to be in my interest.
Yeah, if we put it the way you phrased it before, you said we haven't experimented to feel the benefits, but a lot of us see the benefits as drawbacks. We know, maybe I won't feel as comfortable having random sex with people, and we see that as a drawback rather than a good thing moving forward.
Yeah. Or I'll miss out on the prime of my life. Yeah, it's a common thing said by men, you know, like, while I'm in the prime of my life and I can have an erection, got to use it. You know, that kind of thinking. And this is the kind of thinking we have about a lot of things, right? We're having this thinking that, you know, there should be mitigating circumstances as to what we do, you know. And this mitigation of our own, what we believe God is going to do is control our pleasure in some way, right? And we've never experienced the pleasure we have with having a relationship with God, so we don't know the bliss that's there. And so we fundamentally believe, well, I already know what brings me happiness. That's what I'm going to do, right? Without the thought of the things that bring us unhappiness. So for many of us, a lot of our physical ailments and injuries are based only on how unloving we're being. And yet we don't consider our physical diseases as how unloving we're being, do we? We go, oh, it's just a body, how it works or whatever. We're not considering love in that regard. There's also a lot of spiritual pain that many of us are carrying around that we don't consider as pain because we don't think spiritual things are very important. Our priority system is fundamentally physical first, whatever helps me physically, and for some it's even sexual first and then physical. In other words, sexual benefit they'll have even if there's physical pain associated. An example of that is STDs. Like, you can have an STD and some people still want to have sex with an STD, right? And they do. So that's an example of sex is before the physical benefit even, right? And then you've got emotions, which are way, way down on the list of pain for most people's measurement. And then you've got spiritual pain that all of society's in. That's like, most of us think that's zero. There's no pain associated with that. And yet, that is the biggest pains of all. You'll find that when you pass and you have to work through things. For many of you, you will only work through things, unfortunately, when you pass. And this is what we're trying to help you change. But you'll find when you pass and you have to work through things, you'll come to the conclusion eventually that it's the spiritual things, the beliefs and the principles that you didn't have that will take you the longest to develop. Make sense? Mm-hmm. And some of the other things you'll change pretty rapidly, but the spiritual things take the longest. So we've got to get our perspective right. God's love has perspective. It knows spiritual things, emotional things, sexual things, physical things. That's the hierarchy. That's where your levels of pain are. Many of you go, but I'm in so much physical pain. That's when I start to make change. And I'm going, but way before that, there's the emotional pain and the spiritual pain you're in that you didn't even notice. And that's what's caused these physical things to occur. Yeah. So the prayer sort of highlights these problems to us. And that's the benefit of pondering it. Yeah. But does that make sense to you, Perry, about why there's this inclination to think selfishly? Because that's your inclination. You're saying people care about being more loving. No, they care about being less painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't hardly see any people who care about being more loving. Most people don't even think about it.
Gotcha.
And the only thing that drives them into being more loving is when the pain's too great.
Yeah. From a selfish point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the pain's not great, you go back into exactly the same behaviour that you went in before, right? The motivation is flawed. God's love measures motivation, right? To have a pure desire, the motivation has to be pure. And it's not a pure motivation to just avoid pain. That's not a pure motivation. It is a motivation. We talked about that yesterday. But it's not a pure one.
Do we have, generally then, there's conflict, because it says the medicine, so to speak, is God's love, but then the feeling in the heart is, but I don't want that, because then some change is going to come.
Yeah.
You've got to somehow Miranda around wanting the thing that you, in your heart, don't want, but that's the thing that's going to fix it.
Yeah, it's sad, eh?
It's really sad.
Sad, yeah. But it demonstrates the faith is not yet built.
Yeah.
The faith is saying, but it's not going to bring me the benefits. See, the main reason why most of us haven't prayed at this point is because we don't believe in it. We don't believe in its benefit.
If we look in the prayer, the 5th paragraph.
It addresses the issue.
Let me have such faith as will cause me to know that you are my Father and the bestower of every good and perfect gift. Most of us think that God's not going to bestow good and perfect things in our life.
Yeah. In fact, we're taught by religion even nowadays that he's not going to. What are you taught from religion? Do the rules or else what? Not just punish, just you're not just punished once. It's hellfire forever. Eternal damnation. It's that's pretty severe, right? Yeah. And then there's also just the fact you've done it. You should be so ashamed, and it's not an education problem for most of us. We treat it as a shame problem as well. So in other words, we feel they're taught to religions that teach their adherents to feel ashamed, rather than teaching them to learn the lesson.
To course correct.
To course correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're not trying to shame you here. We're just trying to course correct. We're trying to help you measure the painful results and see the results. Let yourself see them in your own life.
But the good thing you've identified, Perry, is that you lack faith. You lack faith.
Very important.
In my homework, that was the paragraph I wrote down.
Yeah.
What's blocking me?
Yes.
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah.
Because it is true. And it is a big issue for anybody not praying.
Yeah.
is the lack of faith.
And things that have helped me with faith is to realise that my lack of faith is driven by emotions that I don't want to feel.
And also that you justify.
That I'm holding on to as true and correct. Like, this is my faith. It's going to be bad. I know better than God, actually. But having your feelings of a lack of faith having the feelings, not living in them, is the only antidote to building faith.
Yeah.
As well as sort of...
So the irony of that is you've got to feel how little faith you have.
How hopeless
and let that go in order to begin developing some faith. Yeah. And most of you don't want to do that because it feels so hopeless. Yeah. It just feels like gut-wrenchingly hopeless, to be honest, to go through the feeling that you have no faith and to actually feel it, right? It's just a very, very difficult emotional feeling. Still, as Mary said, an ant one, though. Something you can get over. But it's a difficult emotional feeling that the majority of us go, I can't bear that.
Yeah, we do. You talked about benefits. The awesome thing about when you are willing to have some of those I don't have any faith feelings is that if you have them, you almost immediately feel the benefit. You almost immediately feel lighter. As soon as you're done with them, it's like, wow, that was heavy. I've been carrying that, and it's been colouring everything around me.
The world looks brighter straight away. Even though it's quite a dark condition, it still looks brighter after you've dealt with your hopelessness.
Yeah. But most of us aren't even sort of courageous enough to admit how hopeless we actually feel about many matters, including receiving God's love. You know, we try to reframe it to ourselves. Sometimes, you touched on this yesterday, where we come to another Divine Truth lecture to get all G'd up on hope, rather than letting the truth that's presented hit the what we believe is the reality inside of us, which is almost sometimes the exact opposite of what's being presented. Like, that'll never work. Love isn't real. Love's just some crap I've been, abused with my whole life. People who loved me said that, did all these horrible things. I don't actually believe that anyone's going to be... So all of these kind of feelings, if we're really honest with ourselves, get triggered as we hear God's truth. And allowing yourself to have those feelings is the thing that's going to help you to feel the prayer rather than read the prayer. Yeah.
And you can talk to God about that lack of faith. And in talking out
when
loud.
there's a lack of faith, talk first about that.
Yeah.
Because God loves you being in a state of truth.
Yes.
So when you're honest with yourself, like, I just feel hopeless about you. I feel like you're not going to help me out. I feel like everything you're going to tell me to do is going to be not in my interest. Be honest about it. If you believe in God at all. If you don't, just say, I don't even believe in you.
Yep.
I don't even believe you exist. I don't even believe that you're real. So why, I'll try it as an experiment, but I don't even believe you're real.
The
kind of thing.
wonderful thing about that experiment, and I talked about it a little bit in our last seminar in Australia, the big one in Mergen, is that when you engage with that experiment, just like, okay, I'm going to ask for God's love. Every time I think of it, I'll ask for God's love. My experience of that experiment was that it took me right back to ground zero internally, where when I was really honest with myself, all of my false beliefs about God, all of my lack of faith, everything came up just because I was just sincerely trying without any faith, just like, oh, okay, I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask again. I don't want to ask. F you, God. Where have you been? All of this stuff came up. You don't even love me. Why would you love me? Look at all my things. All of this stuff that was really blocking my true and sincere prayer began to be exposed. And this is a wonderful thing about even acknowledging God, even if it's intellectually, and starting a relationship, even if it's like, it's like people who you're like, oh, you want to be friends with me, but I don't really... whatever, we'll have a chat, and eventually you start to realize, okay, yeah. But being in that process with God, even if you don't even believe in God initially, has a certain sort of working on your soul. Yeah. But a lot of us go, we touch into, I don't even have any faith, or, this is going to end badly for me, I'm going to have to give up an addiction. I'm going to wait till I'm more sincere to pray. That's not been my experience of it working. I had many of you have known me many years. When I first met Jesus, I was so angry about so many things, God's laws, who I was, all this stuff. And I would say to Jesus, I don't even want to pray. I'm not going to pray, I'm not sincere. And I'm being honest. I don't want to pray. When I really got honest, I was like, okay, God.
Why don't I want to?
Why don't I want to? This is my list of reasons. And instead of complaining about it to everyone else, I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm going to start this relationship, even if I feel like it's a fractured relationship that you owe me a lot of things that I haven't gotten. And eventually, in that process, I started to realise, wow, where am I at? I'm in quite a dark space here. But I really feel God taught me that.
Yeah, and it didn't matter what I said to Mary.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. It doesn't matter even what a nice person might say to you. You're not going to change unless you receive some of God's love, probably.
Yeah.
Because it's very rare that we even listen to another person.
Yeah. Especially now, justifications and rationalizations. There has to be a certain level of respect for God's authority develop. But again, you don't have to try to emulate that. You have to be honest about where you're at and really face it. The initial quote-unquote praying that I did really didn't go much further than me, but it helped me be more honest about what I was really directing towards God and what my demands were.
Yeah. And was it helpful, Mary, if emotions came up, you didn't try and think about why or second guess, just get straight into the emotion?
Yeah, don't do all that.
Yeah.
That's
the
mind.
Not analyse.
Yeah. The mind gets you out of... Yeah. Like often the mind will come up with doing things, and it's all a distraction from how you feel.
Yeah. And this is also the thing about when you start to learn how prayer really is an emotional exchange, because you feel God respond when you're more honest and emotional, rather than, he's an emotion now, I'm going to analyse it. All that's gone now. All my relating to God doesn't respond to that in me.
Yeah. I've noticed if I've been talking to God and I try to be like a good divine truth person, it don't work. And then when I just talk about my feelings, then
things start
moving.
Yeah, God wants your honesty, not your fake. Yeah. And again, this is another injury in the world, isn't it? It wants our fake rather than our honesty. This is why politicians lie to us, because they know you want fake. You don't want the truth. If you knew the truth, you'd be scared. So you don't want it. Even the average person, if just knowing a little bit of truth frightens them. If you knew what your partner really felt about you, the average person's pretty freaked out by that. It's better that they don't tell me what they really feel. So and it's the same when it comes to family, friends. We don't want to be honest, but the relationship with God, God's love requires honesty. To receive it, you need to be honest. Yeah? God, in fact, gives love to people who are honest. Sometimes you'll receive love when you're yelling at him.
Yeah.
Because he's going, just go for it.
More of that, please. Yeah.
Just get real about how you feel. Yeah?
Now we can finally start talking, now that you're being honest.
Yeah. So that's the, we need to have, we're over our lunch break. But so after the break, we'll just be referring more to the prayer and looking at and giving you the opportunity to ask about specific issues. We want you to, though, not get too hung up about all of the explanation of your issue. Trust a bit that we can feel what the primary issue is, and we'll discuss that. Yep?
Thank you.
All right.
See you here at Kutsutu.
Thank you, guys.